Previously on Music and Stories, the story of my life, I like saying previously. It makes it seem so official, like it's a real TV series. So previously, I was born April 30th, 1948, Roosevelt Hospital, Jersey City, New Jersey. Right in the heart of baby boomer time frame. And that's my father, Jacob, who was also born at Roosevelt Hospital in Jersey City, New Jersey. And that's one of the things that kind of held us together. It's the beginning of what this story is about, which is fathers and sons. And it's an important story to me. And here I am about a year and a half later with not a great haircut, but really good shoes. I learned to walk, and my family was so proud that they took those shoes, and one of the shoes, the left one, and silvered it so I could have it forever, which is great because it shows me how far I've come from here to here, which is what I wear now, a size 16. And a lot of stuff has happened in between. Now, I told you about me being obsessive at this age. There I am in my grandmother's dining room with this incredibly great wallpaper. I was really obsessed with television. Alan, don't watch so much television. It's gonna hurt your eyes. If you only knew how much I've watched since then. And comic books and Mad Magazine, and of course the radio, Murray the K and the Swing and Soiree, which I listened to all the time. And I wanted to read every book in the Portly #4 school library, which looks exactly the same today as it did back in 1953 when I started kindergarten there. And I did a pretty good job reading all those books. But this is about fathers and sons. And this is my father when he was a really young man with my grandmother. And my grandmother came from Poland, from a little town called Kalisz in Poland. And so did my grandfather, and so did, coincidentally, on my mother's side of the family. Everyone came from Kalisz, and they all left Kalisz in the 30s or before to get away from the fact that the Poles were turning them into the Nazis. And my mother came to the United States in 1922, and she married Herman, and I really love those grandparents. And one time, I said to my grandmother, what attracted you to Grandpa? You know, what was it about him? He says, well, I was best friends with his sister, and I thought he was really handsome, and I kind of finagled an invitation over to where he lived, and he had this little one-room apartment. It was very nice. And when we got in, he sat us down and he said, can I offer you something? And he made us tea. And I thought, wow, he's so polite. And then he said, is anybody hungry? And he opened up his cabinet. And here's my grandfather. And he had half a loaf of bread and 3 sardines. And he offered us one. And my grandmother said, she's thinking, wow, he's got 3 sardines. This guy's doing really well. This is some catch. That's the way she talked. So I reeled him in. And so they were married for, 40, 50 years. My father wanted to become an artist. He studied painting and was really good at it. And he went to the Pratt Institute. But World War II intruded, and he became a paratrooper. And this is what he looked like a little later in the 60s. A very handsome guy. And he paratrooped, he was over France, and he landed in France. And when the war ended, he was invited to go see a bunch of relatives, everyone from, that town of Kalisz in Poland. And they were all together in this one place in France. And he met a young woman, which is my mother. And she was also from Kalisz, and she didn't speak English. Now, everyone who was there had escaped from the Nazis. And it was a time of great sorrow with them. But my father, as an American, I think my mother told me he had a sense of life and joy about him, and she immediately fell for him. Here she is on that same vacation. It's a picture of my father wearing a bathing suit. She came to America, and after a while they got married, and it soon became apparent to my father that he couldn't support a family painting. So he had to make a big decision, and that he went into the family business, which was embroidery. And everyone he knew was in the embroidery business. And he put aside his painting. And he never lost his love of the visual arts and culture, and neither did my mother. And this is our little family unit, okay? That's me. I'm about 4 years old there. my mom, who's looking beautiful, Rochelle, and my sister Claudia. And we, way Claudia looks, we affectionately call this her Elmer Fudd stage. So my dad loved movies, and growing up in the Depression, the movie Lost Horizons made a big impression on him. Shangri-La and getting away from it all, and a life where you live forever. And he pointed out to me, and I watched it on TV, and I loved it too. And I went out and I got the book, and I did a book report on it, and I got an A. And then he gave me something I can't thank him enough. He turned me on to the Marx Brothers. Now, if you know me, you know how much I love the Marx Brothers. And this is the Paramount collection, so it's got my favorite movie of theirs, Duck Soup. It's probably one of my top 10 movies of all time. And Monkey Business and Horse Feathers, and I also like Night at the Opera. I love the Marx Brothers. Let me just take a little detour here. When I first came to Los Angeles in 1973, John Davison, a really close friend of mine, said there's a movie playing at the Academy that night. I didn't even know what the Academy was, so we went to this Academy screening. Now, Leo McCarey had directed Duck Soup, and this was a rare Leo McCarey movie called The Milky Way. And I was pretty excited to see it in 35 millimeter in this place. Now, you have to picture me with hair out to here. Huge halo of hair and overalls with psychedelic patches on them. That's the only clothes I had. And I go into the bathroom, and I'm standing at the urinal, and I'm taking a pee, and I look over, and stepping into the next urinal is Groucho Marx. Now, for me, this is like, oh my God, this is my hero. And I was so shocked, I just stared at him, and he's peeing and he's peeing. He's an older man, and I'm just looking at him. I'm thinking really hard. Maybe I should ask him for his autograph. And I must have been thinking so hard. He picked up on my psychic sense, because he turns to me and he says, "Forget it, kid. My hands are full." Right? Okay, my Groucho moment, The first movie that I ever went to see was Peter Pan, which my mother took me to see at the Roxy Theater, which was like the Radio City Music Hall of its day. And it was at a big stage show and a country, the Bear Country, which was a Disney live action thing about animals, and Peter Pan, and a stage show which had bears ice skating on the stage. Now, I don't know if it happened that way. That's the way I remember it. When the movie was over, I was adamant about not leaving the theater. I had found where I wanted to be for the rest of my life, which was in a place like this, watching Peter Pan. I was adamant about a lot of things. So when the next Disney movie came out, my mother took me to see it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, like a lot of people who saw this movie, when the beautiful evil queen takes the potion and turns into the horrible witch, I freaked out. I went crazy. I was scared to death, and I grabbed my mother, and we ran out of the theater. And then we got about a block or two away, and I realized that as scared as I was, I would not see the rest of this movie. So I begged her, and she walked back, and we went back, and we saw the rest of the movie. And then came one of the big influences of my life, and a guy I still love today, and that's Jerry Lewis. And here he is with Dean Martin and Artists and Models. And I went to see every Jerry Lewis movie that came out. And if my mother didn't want to take me, the best of all was to go with my grandfather. Because my grandfather, Herschel, loved Jerry Lewis. Herschel spoke 4 languages, and he saw a lot of Yiddish theater, and he remembered when Jerry Lewis was Joseph Levitch. And so whenever a Jerry Lewis movie would play, he'd say, "Let's go see the new Levitch picture." And of course, one of my really, really favorite ones is The Nutty Professor, which I took my daughter to see. So it goes round and round. And I have to say something about the Disney movies of the day, because there was a lot of them, and this is a very famous one, Old Yeller, and I was intrigued, and I wanted to, when I saw it, it was traumatizing. I mean, all these kids in the theater crying because Old Yeller dies, and oh, I should have said spoiler alert. The dog dies at the end of the movie, but anyway, so I thought I'll do a trailer from hell about this, and be interesting. The theme will be movies that really freak us out when we're young, and so starting to watch Old Yeller, and this movie really sucks. It's terrible. I was glad the dog died. It's just amateurish and bad, and so I didn't do it. How can I recommend it to people? But now we're getting into the sublime. Rio Bravo. I mean, how many ways can I tell you how much I love Rio Bravo? John Wayne. John Wayne is a hero and always will be. So that's just like a given. And co-starring with him is Jerry Lewis's friend Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson, who was on TV and sang "I'm a Traveling Man" and Lonesome Town, and he closed his eyes and he was so sexy. And then his name was Colorado in the movie, and he chewed a gun really fast. Of course, for left is Walter Brennan, and he's on the Real McCoys, and it's a classic movie. So I had good taste because I also liked the Horse Soldiers, John Ford movie. What's interesting is that Ford and Hawks, when I got to film school, I realized part of the reason I liked these movies is they were great directors, along with the guy directed Artists and Models, Frank Tashlin. But I love this movie. It's not a major Ford movie if you're, want to get into the arcane, dissection, exegesis of Ford's career. But I like the conflict between William Holden and John Wayne, and there's some really, really terrific set pieces in it, where the boys in the military academy try to go to war with the soldiers. This is a very, very good John Ford movie. Oh, and the opening has them, this horse soldiers marching across the horizon singing. And any movie that starts with a song, I like. I like songs in movies, in case you hadn't noticed. Which brings us to musicals. And my mother took me to see Damn Yankees. She said, well, let's go see a musical. It's a holiday. And I was like, I don't know if I want to see a musical. And she says, it's about baseball. And I was, of course, Mickey Mantle, and the New York Yankees loomed large in my life. So we saw Damn Yankees, which is pretty good. Another musical that stood out for me is Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And, I looked through all the shelves. I don't have it, So I'll be on Amazon as soon as this is over. How can I not? And as I got older, my taste became more sophisticated, and I liked the dark humor. And like most, teenagers, I was sarcastic. And with my friends, we went the opening night to see Dr. Strangelove, which, is one of the greatest movies ever made. We had good taste. But the rest of Fort Lee didn't, because by the time the movie was over, we were practically the only ones in the theater. And for sure, we were the only ones laughing at the end when the world blew up. But this is a masterpiece. This is a great movie. Now, as a family, here we are, a little later, in our living room in now Fort Lee, New Jersey. I must be about 11 there. And my mom and now Claudia has stopped being Elmer Fudd, and she's adorable. She looks like Darlene in the Mouseketeers in this photo. We started going to movies as a family. You go on vacation, and there are certain nights that really stand out. And we used to go to the Jersey Shore a lot. And we're in Asbury Park one Saturday night. We had one of those great fried fish dinners where you have lobster and fried clams, and then afterwards you saltwater taffy to make the night complete. And we all went to the movies to see this, the thrill of it all. I like this movie so much, I did a trailer from hell about it. I love this movie. It's very funny. Doris Day is terrific in it. Carl Reiner wrote it. Her chemistry here with James Garner. It's a lot better movie than you think it is. Check it out. And of course, my parents were very much into culture, so they tried to expose us to things. And very often we'd go into New York City on a Sunday and go to a museum or something, and a Museum of Natural History, the Museum of Modern Art, and then as a treat, we'd go down to Chinatown and have Chinese food. So you can see why that was a big lure for me. If you know me, you know how I feel about Chinese food. I mean, when I turned 70, we had dinner at a Chinese restaurant. But one of the days we went in was to see this, Lawrence of Arabia. A great movie, overwhelming when you're a young boy to see this. I mean, the scale of it, the epic nature of it. This was like 70 millimeter roadshow attraction of it, and 3 hours long and thrilling. And it became my favorite movie after seeing it. For many, many years it was. And it did that thing that movies do, which is they take us somewhere else. They take us to something we've never known about, and they lift up the scale of it, and you felt like you were in the middle of this war, you know. We still go see David Lean's picture, Lawrence of Arabia. But that's not the place I'm heading here. Here's a picture of me and my dad when I was bar mitzvahed. And one of the things that about my father was he was a really good teacher about the lessons of life. He was very encouraging about my studies, but also was really strict. Look, we had our differences of opinions. Certainly the generation gap, when that reared its head, it became a very difficult relationship at times. We saw the world so differently. But he gave me the important lessons of how to do a job correctly, how to apply yourself. I mean, when we shoveled snow, it wasn't just shoveling snow. He talked me through it with the methodology of it and how it's important to finish each job the same way you started it. And I owe him a lot of those lessons. And one of the biggest things that I owe him was when I was 13 years or so old, on a Sunday, my parents said, let's go see a movie, which was great. And, we were all for it. And he took me and my sister, my mom, and they took us to the Queen Anne Theater in Teaneck, New Jersey, which was an art theater at the time. And it was playing a movie from this trilogy, which is the Apu trilogy. And I'm going to mispronounce his name, Satyajit Ray. And I had never seen a foreign movie before, and I'd never seen a movie with subtitles. And this day is one of the most memorable experiences of my life because, I'm talking a lot about stories, but the stories that I learned from this movie have stayed with me. It's part of a trilogy. There's 3 movies. There's one with Apu when he's a young boy. Then he's very smart and he moves to the city and starts to get an education, and he's separated from his family and his village roots. And that's the second one. And the third one is the one we went to see that day, and it's called The World of Apu. And it starts out with him as a young man, and now he's an artist. He's a writer, and he's writing a book about love, and he lives in this one-room tenement. It's a terrible apartment with his best friend, and his best friend is always on his case about the fact that Apu is writing this book about love and he's never been in love. And it's even as young as I was, I understood this conflict that shouldn't an artist be doing things about what they've experienced? But then I was too young to know that. I was thinking, well, he can use his imagination. And it was certainly the argument that Apu used. And his best friend was getting married. So he goes to the friend's wedding, and the friend doesn't show up. He's bailed on the wife, who's this 17-year-old young girl, and they're in a tiny village, and it's a great shame on both families. And so being the best man, he has to marry the woman. So he marries her. And it's like the last thing he wants to do. I mean, she's so shy and she's so unsophisticated. And he takes her to the city, and they move in together again in this tiny apartment. And he's barely scraping by as a tutor and a teacher. But as time goes on, they fall in love. And their love grows larger and larger in this small apartment. And I could feel this. Because even though it was across these cultures, and it took me a little while to figure out the whole subtitle of it, the storytelling, the humanity of it affected me. And Ray's movies are very real. He turned around Indian cinema, which at that time was about Bollywood, and he made real movies, realistic movies with non-actors. This boy had never acted before. And they're a lot like Italian neorealism. And I was swept up in this story because she's pregnant and she's going to have a baby. And when she gives birth, it's a boy. And she dies in childbirth. And this destroys Apu. And it so rocks his world. He rejects his own son. He blames his son for the death of his wife, the only person he's ever really loved. And it becomes so bad and so tense and so moving. He gives the boy away to the grandparents. He never wants to see the boy again. The mother's parents get the boy, and he gets out of his apartment with his few belongings and his book, which he's now going to finish, and he leaves the city, and he goes off and becomes practically a monk, wandering like a bum, wandering all around India on this long journey, trying to find himself now. So even my 13 or 14-year-old sense, it's way over my head, this movie, but it's getting to me. And finally, he climbs this mountain because he knows maybe he'll receive enlightenment on top of the mountain. And he looks out over the jungle and everything. And I intuited exactly what this character was thinking. That's how great a director Ray is. He's thinking, I'm wrong, that my book is junk and I know nothing, that you really have to experience love to know it. You have to experience life to know it. And he takes the book out and he throws it off the mountain. And the pages just go fluttering down through the trees. It's such an unforgettable image. And the next thing he does is he goes to find his son, who's living at the seaside, and the son sees him coming on the beach. I think he talks to the grandparents first, and he says, I want to see him. And the son sees him and wants no part of the father that rejected him. And I can feel my father looking at me because this is so incredibly tense and moving and real. And they face off each other, and he reaches out to his son, and the son reaches out to him, and he picks up the son and puts him on his shoulder. And as the music soars, and the music is by Ravi Shankar, the great sitar player, one of the greatest musicians in world music has ever lived, they start walking off on the pursuit of life together. As the music's playing and the camera's moving with them on their back as they're walking away and on their faces. I mean, I think I cried. It was such a powerful experience. And it was one of the things that brought me close to my father, and I think he really shared in my success as a director. He actually went to some pretty rotten theaters to see some of my Corman movies. I remember him seeing Rock and Roll High School with a whole bunch of punkers, and I said, "Did you like it?" He says, "I didn't really know what was going on." He says, "Everyone was laughing, and it felt like I'm watching Chinese humor, and I didn't speak Chinese." Anyway, as we got older, we got closer and closer, and he was very proud that I had succeeded in the arts. And in fact, he started painting again. And he had been since this is the mid-'80s when this picture was taken. And now he had a little studio that he was working in. And he would put on headphones to listen to WQXR, and he'd paint every day. And it made him very happy. And an interesting experience was that he asked me what I thought of one of his early paintings. Now, when you're in the television and movie business, people throw around opinions all the time, and they give you notes, things like that. So I looked at the painting and said parts of it I liked, and I criticized things I thought, well, you should work on that. And I hadn't realized how sensitive he would be about that. And it was a really bad choice on my part, and he got very, very upset. And now my parents had been a very bitter divorce when I was a freshman in college, and now he was married to this woman Jan, who is a lovely person, and I'm still very close to Jan. And Jan pulled me aside and said, "You really upset your father." And if you Chris, I thought I had just made a comment about the lack of detail on one character. And so anyway, I went up to him, we started talking, and he said that he was very upset about it, but he realized that it wasn't going to come easy, that the painting was going to have to work out, and he appreciated that. And so here he is. This is a very important picture to me. This is in 1992, and he's walking with our son, Sam. And Sam was born in 1989, so he's about 3 or 4 years old here. Now, Sam had autism and a lot of various neurological disorders, and it was a huge strain on our family, and certainly on my wife Joanne, who took the brunt of caring for him and the intensity of it all. And she was selfless in that. And here he was like really in a good mood, walking with my dad. Now at this point, my father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And we had come to New York to see him and to hang out and spend time together. Um, and so this was early in the cycle of the cancer. And I wanted to, when I came to New York, to do something for him, to show him how much I loved him and how much I'd learned from him. So what I thought about, and I thought about how can you explain to someone everything that they've meant to you, how can you return something to them that they've given you? And I thought about it and I found a rare, and it was out of print VHS copy of the World of Apu. So while everyone was out at dinner one night, I put it in the VHS machine. And my father and I sat there, and he was on a hospital bed at that point, and we watched The World of Apu. And within 3 or 4 shots, it was as if we had never left the theater. We remembered everything about the movie so vividly. And when he rejects the son, now I was an adult with a son, and I was married and in love with my wife, and everything that was in the movie had now become even more powerful for me, which is one of the great things about art. And when the movie was over, we were both crying, and I felt like I'd done the right thing and given back something to my father, and it was wonderful. And so here he is. He died 6 months later. Here he is in the car with cab with Sam. And Sam passed away 10 years later of seizure syndrome. It was a big change in our family. And I'm going to talk more about Sam at another time, but I just wanted to talk about fathers and sons and all that that meant to me and give something back to my father. So next week, I promise you, Fort Lee High School. Now, isn't it grand? But what goes on in Fort Lee High School, all I can say is, imagine what went on there if what came out of there was rock and roll high school. So we're going to have some fun with that. And it's the 60s, so the times they are changing. So we'll see a lot about that. Among the things that changed was the way school was taught was not the way I wanted it to be taught. And you'll find out a lot of the trouble I got in with the faculty and stuff about my views on Vietnam and other things. And of course, we're going to end on a highlight because I was there. And as much as I love Bob Dylan then, Bob goes electric. And I was at that concert. So next time, we're going to go electric with Bob. Come gather around people wherever you roam. See ya.